Welcome back, Year 5. Today we're continuing our work on angles. Specifically, we'll be looking at calculating the missing angles around a point. Now, this is pretty similar to yesterday's intention of finding the angles on a straight line, because you know a straight line, or a half turn, is 180 degrees. Well, when you're calculating angles around a point, you know that a full turn around that point is 360 degrees. So here's our intention. Calculate missing angles around a point by reasoning about the 360 degrees in a whole turn. Let's start by looking at an example of this. This example is taken from the Think Together portion of the textbook. Number 1, it says, what angles are shown on this angle maker? Notice that Flo has said, I will measure one angle, then calculate the other angle. I wonder why she said she's only going to measure one. Why not measure both? If she has a protractor, can't she measure both? Well, take a look closely at that image. Which of the angles could you easily measure with a protractor? The yellow one, it's an acute angle. However, the red angle is what we call a reflex angle. That means it's more than a straight line, it's more than 180 degrees. Your protractor can only measure up to 180 degrees, so we can't actually measure that reflex angle all in one go. So what is Flo suggesting that we do? Well, since we know that that full turn, that whole circle, is 360 degrees, she can measure the small angle, the yellow one, and then take that away from 360 degrees to find out what the red angle is, because that will complete the whole turn. So let's start by measuring that yellow angle. I'll put my protractor on top, line up the 0 line, and make sure the center points match up. And I can see that this angle measures 45 degrees. So first I'll write that the first angle is 45 degrees. Now to figure out the red angle, I have to take 45 degrees away from 360 degrees, because 360 degrees is a full turn. So 360 minus 45 equals 315. That means that my red angle is 315 degrees. How can I be sure this is correct? Well, when I add these two angles up, do they make 360? Do they make a full turn? Yes, they do. It's a fact family. 315 plus 45 makes 360. So I feel confident that I've calculated the red angle correctly, even though I couldn't use my protractor to measure it. Let's move on to question 2. Number 2 says to find the missing angles. So we have A, B, and C. For each of these, there's at least one angle that's labeled, and then another angle that's missing that we need to calculate. Well, the same rule applies. We know that a full turn is 360 degrees. So if we take away the angles that are already labeled, we'll be left with the angle that we don't know. So let's try that for A. We know that a full turn is 360 degrees, and we know that the angle that's labeled is 130 degrees. So let's do a full turn 360 minus 130. That will leave us with our missing angle, which is 230 degrees. What about B? There we have two angles labeled, 120 and 120. Well, same principle applies here. We need to take away the angles that we know from the full turn, 360 degrees. But since we're taking away two numbers, let's start by combining them. So let's add up 120 plus 120, and that gives us 240. Now we can take 240 degrees away from 360 degrees to figure out what's left. And what is left? 120 degrees. So that means that missing angle is also 120 degrees. Finally, C. This one, they've tried to trick us a little bit. At first when I looked at it, I said, why is the middle part shaped so funny? And then I realized that that top angle, they've put a little square in the corner. That's why we have that funny shape and it's not a perfect circle. Why did they put a little square there? What does that represent? A 90-degree turn. So that means that top angle is a right angle. So we have 90 degrees and we have 88 degrees. Now we need to figure out what's missing. Well, first let's put together the angles that we know. 90 plus 88 equals 178. So let's take that away from 360. 360 minus 178 equals 182. So our missing angle is 182 degrees. Notice that in all of these examples, we had to take away the angles that had already been measured from 360 degrees because a full turn is 360 degrees. That's the only thing different from yesterday. Since we're doing a full turn, we're subtracting from 360. Yesterday we were doing a half turn. How many degrees are in a half turn? 180 degrees. So once you understand the principle of subtracting to find what's left, this is a super easy task to do. Now that I've shown you a couple of examples, I want you to try this worksheet. It says to work out the missing angles, just like we were doing before. Remember that the angles around a turn add up to 360 degrees. They've also made a note here that these angles are not drawn to scale. That means they have not drawn them with a protractor, so they're not really perfect. They've just put down the labels that they want you to work out. So you can't take out your protractor to try and figure this out. You have to calculate it. What I want you to do is pause the screen and work these out, number them in your notebook, and then when you come back, I'll show you the answers. All right, let's take a look. For number 1, you should have done 360 minus 260, which would have given you an answer of 100, so the missing angle is 100. For number 2, you should have done 360 minus 210, which would have left 150. So the missing angle is 150 degrees. For number 3, you should have done 360 minus 90, which would leave you with 270 degrees. So your answer is 270 degrees for that angle. For number 4, you would have needed to do 2 steps. First, you need to add up the 2 angles. 90 plus 110 equals 200. So then you need to take 200 degrees away from 360 degrees. And that would leave you with 160 degrees. So the missing angle is 160 degrees. Number 5 was also a 2-step process. First, you had to add up 115 plus 170, and that would have given you 285. Then you subtract 285 from 360, and that leaves you with 75 degrees. So that missing angle is 75 degrees. Finally, for number 6, you could have done it a couple ways. You could have added up the 2 missing angles and then subtracted that from 360, or you might have realized since 180 degrees is at the bottom, that means there's 180 degrees at the top. 2 half turns make a whole turn. So you could have just done 180 minus 42 to find out that missing supplementary angle, which is 138 degrees. Either way you chose to do it, you should have gotten an answer of 138 degrees. Now let's take a look at the challenge from the textbook. It says, Jamila wants to copy this angle. She says, my protractor can only measure to 180 degrees. And as you can see, the angle she wants to copy is 230 degrees. A little note there for us says, angles bigger than 180 degrees are called reflex angles, which we talked about before. Now Dexter has made a little note as well, saying that he thinks Jamila can use what we've learned about angles today to help her draw this angle. But how? Well, notice next to Dexter there's an illustration of the angle, and we see the 230 degree angle labeled again, but on the other side of it is a question mark. What would that question mark angle equal? How would you work it out? Well, we know today that angles around a point add up to 360 degrees. So if we do 360 degrees, take away 230 degrees, we'll find what that question mark is. What is it? Go ahead, work it out real quick. You should have gotten 130 degrees. Can you draw a 130 degree angle with your protractor? Absolutely. And if you draw a 130 degree angle, what's automatically going to be on the other side of it? A 230 degree angle, because together they make a full turn. So Jamila really can draw this angle. Let me show you how I would write my explanation. Now question A says, explain how Jamila could use her protractor to draw an angle of 230 degrees. I said, Jamila can start by calculating the missing angle. She can do this by subtracting 230 from 360, because the 2 angles together make a complete turn. When she does this, she'll see that the missing angle is 130 degrees. If she draws a 130 degree angle, the other side of it will automatically be 230 degrees. So in my explanation, I've shown that I understand that the angles around a point always add up to 360 degrees. And I can use that knowledge to draw a reflex angle, even though my protractor wouldn't really let me. Now it's time for your independent work. For questions 1 and 2, you simply have to find the missing angles by calculating them. So remember, all the angles around a point add up to 360. So if you take away what you already know from 360, you'll find the missing angle. For number 3 on the second page, it's a lot like what we just looked at. You're going to be asked to draw a reflex angle. That's an angle bigger than 180 degrees. You can't do that with your protractor. So what you have to do is find the other angle that when you add it to that reflex angle, it makes a full turn. When you do that, you can draw that smaller angle, but you'll just label the other side of it as the reflex angle because together those two angles make 360 degrees. For question number 4, despite the way it's presented, you're also finding a missing angle. In this problem, it describes 2 turns that Max makes. Then it says that he made a third turn, but it doesn't tell you how much it's worth, but you know that that third turn makes a complete turn when you add it to the other 2 turns. So you can draw a diagram for this one. You can make a circle, label the 2 angles that you know, and then you just need to work out the third missing angle. For question 5, it's going to require a written explanation. Now for this one, you're going to need to use some critical thinking skills. Think to yourself, what happens when I split a circle into 4 equal parts? That's the only hint I'm giving you. For question 6, the challenge, there are 3 different diagrams drawn. And on each of them, none of the angles are labeled. They all just have a letter given to them. But notice they all have the same letter. That means that it's all the same angle. So for A, all of those angles have the same value. For B, all those angles have the same value. And for C, all those angles have the same value. So to work this one out, I'll give you a hint, you're going to need division. That's all I'm going to say. And as always, I want you to complete that reflection. When you're done, take pictures of your work and you can email it to me. As always, stay safe and I'll see you soon.